The NFL had a recent controversial take swirling in the news when notoriously incorrect analyst Mel Kiper voiced his opinion that there should be rules put in place to get rid of the too high safety looks on defense. I wanted to give my perspective on this whole controversy and maybe even discuss how similar changes to NFL rules have damaged the game. So Starcraft, an RTS game known for precise inputs and high APM gameplay actions per minute, had the Protoss versus Zerg matchup with a meta that favored the Zerg player by about 53%. This would essentially mean that in a high level of play, being the Protoss player would result in being put at an immediate disadvantage, right? The meta strategies for both teams seem to indicate so, but this all changed when a player by the name of Bisu revolutionized the matchup after creating a new strategy to win 3-0 in a matchup against a very formidable opponent in competitive play. His new style of play shook up the meta, taking a matchup that favored the Zerg player by 53% to a matchup that favored the Protoss side by about 56%. So you're probably saying, Zach, who cares about a Starcraft meta? We're talking about football here. I think this just goes to demonstrate a very key principle in games that involve real-time strategy. So Charles Barkley once went on record saying that the best ability is availability. I would venture to say that the best ability is adaptability. We're seeing at a rate higher than ever before that NFL teams are adapting to what they see more and more efficiently and more accurately. The too high safety look is simply a swing in the NFL metagame, an adaptation based on statistical evidence that it is better to give up shorter plays than it is to leave yourself open to explosive shots from the opposing offense. Defensive coordinators have found a way to do what they are being paid to do, adapt to this ever-shifting metagame that is the NFL. But just to humor everyone, let's take a look a little bit further into some statistics around explosive plays, touchdown scoring in the NFL from decades before and after the popularization of the too high shell. So the too high shell became popular, more widely practiced around 2010, Vic Fangio style of defense. So I went ahead and compiled data about explosive play percentage and touchdown scoring in the NFL from the years prior to this popularization and after. I'm also aware that Mel noted that he wants the NFL to return to the glory days like he watched in the 1970s and 60s and 80s or whatever he was watching. Although in the 70s and 80s they did play less games per season, the amount of touchdowns scored was also significantly lower than what we are currently seeing in the NFL. So no season between 1960 and 1980 ever saw a total of over 800 touchdowns. When we're looking at data from 1996 to 2010, years prior to the too high popularity, we saw an explosive play rate of about 10 to 12%. In the years following up to our current year, so 2011 to 2023, we saw that the explosive play rate is about 12 to 15%. We have also seen an increase in touchdown scoring in the NFL. So in 1996 to 2010, we saw about 15,380 total touchdowns. And in 2011 to 2023, we have also seen about 16,760 total touchdowns scored. So a difference of about 1,300-ish touchdowns, 1,340 maybe. Does Mel Kiper watch the game? I'm not too sure. Does he miss the game that he knows and loves from the 60s through the 80s, or does he just miss being young and watching the NFL? That's a question that only he can answer, maybe. So, even after reviewing all of that data, we could still speculate that watching the game with the safeties 10 yards off the ball is just something that makes it less exciting to watch. But when we talk about rule change implementation, in my opinion, it's important that any rule change would fall under two criteria. The rule does not damage the integrity of the game, and number two, it effectively manages the thing that it is put in place to change. So let's talk a little bit about both of these criteria with some examples of failures and successes. Quarterbacks, of course, are notoriously the most protected players on the field at every level. Throughout the course of history, we've seen rule changes that make it more and more strict about how and when you can hit the quarterback, even just making contact, pushing them. A famous controversy happened that I'm sure everybody knows about in the NCAA, where Kenny Pickett made headlines by making a fake slide, tricking a defender into gaining extra yardage after. In one fell swoop, the NCAA quickly swooped in and banned it, said, no, that's not happening anymore. This, in my opinion, was a very good rule change, and I think a lot of people would agree. The design of the quarterback slide is to protect the quarterback. When quarterbacks are allowed to use a measure of safety as a tool to gain more yardage, it becomes a concern to managing the integrity of the game. So there's a rule change put in place to manage the ability to use a slide as a way to gain yardage. The slides affecting the integrity of the game when it's able to be used in a fake way, so they make a rule change to affect that rule, and they kind of bring that balance that they're looking for. We're even starting to notice similar concerns around quarterbacks as they run down the sidelines. So recently, Patrick Mahomes was actually able to turn a play that looked like it was just going to be a short yardage run into a 33-yard rush. As he was slowly striding towards the sideline, he decided to bait the defenders, and then he cut back inside. And before the defenders could regain their steam, he was already upfield. That's a play where most quarterbacks would usually step out of bounds to avoid contact from defenders. As defenders are heavily penalized for making hits along this sideline, it's kind of a generally agreed upon, like gentleman's agreement type thing that the quarterback's going to go out of bounds, the defender's not going to light him up. Fair trade. But it looks like this is something that might actually require an NFL rule change, as runs like Patrick Mahomes in these most recent weeks might become more and more popular. We might notice more and more frustrated defenses where eventually the safety of the players ends up changing on the sideline, as most people would just hit them because they don't want to give them the extra yardage. And these hits are either going to result in more frustrated defensive coordinators, a lot more unnecessary roughness calls on the sideline. There might need to be some changes in the rules along the sideline to kind of dictate that, especially when we look back historically where protections along the sideline were a little bit less safe. I'm sure that there's the clips that everybody's seen where players are getting absolutely thwacked on the sidelines because they didn't go out of bounds quick enough and a defender lights them up. That is in no case happening in the current NFL. But speaking specifically on the proposed changes to two high shells, Mel said that a referee would tell the safeties that they're required to stand closer to the line of scrimmage, essentially scooting them up. Can we effectively manage this within the game while also ensuring that we do not damage its integrity? I don't think so at all. Defenses could solve this issue by having their safeties just immediately sprint back to where they were going to start the play anyway, meaning that this rule is just essentially requiring safeties to run wind sprints on every single play, which doesn't really make sense. Let's just make them do 20 jumping jacks before the ball is snapped, Mal. I mean, that would serve the same purpose. Also, how are we going to enforce this? Will there be an official that moves them up and then also calls an illegal formation penalty on the defense for not maintaining that proximity to the line of scrimmage? Can offenses bait safeties into jumping past this line of scrimmage that is behind them and creating an illegal formation or an offside penalty? When is this rule even enforceable? What happens when there's prevent defenses to prevent Hail Mary situations at the end of halves or during long comebacks or in the fourth quarter at the end of the game? There's situations where those high shells are just warranted. Why do we believe that the only way to make these offenses more explosive or more exciting to watch is to put hurdles in the way of defensive adjustments? If there's somehow someone out there who can answer some of these questions well enough to justify banning two high safeties in a way, I will hear you out, but I just don't see it as a possibility. I think that the NFL is an ever-changing game where we see it swing much like the Starcraft matchup that I had discussed before. We may notice that the offense makes an adjustment to the way that defenses are playing, and then the defense is going to similarly make some adjustments. We notice that the NFL's got a lot of passing going on, so and then more mobile quarterbacks are being introduced as well. So there's a lot of things that the defense is just adjusting to, and they're doing really well at adjusting to right now, and now it's the offense's turn to find their answer. And I don't think the offense is going to be able to find answers if we jump in and coddle them by making sure that the defense isn't allowed to do their jobs. So let's go ahead, let's let the boys play football, let's let the safety sit as far back as we want, and let's let the offense learn to adjust as they've been doing for decades and decades. We have plenty of data and research to adapt. The best teams adapt and adjust, not just within even the grand scheme of things, but within the short term. within quarter to quarter, drive to drive. We're even seeing the introduction of Surface tablets to look at play-by-play on the sideline to learn how to adjust and adapt to these defenses. And this is a very new style of adapting and learning in this game that we're doing it so quickly. So let's let the offense have a turn at figuring out how to adapt, if we don't even believe that they are currently, which I do believe they are. So if I'm wrong, let me know. If I'm right, let me know. If I'm somewhere in the middle, also let me know. Thanks.